Greetings, sisters. Greetings, brothers. Welcome to worship on July 26th, 2020. It's the 9th Sunday of Pentecost. I'm Robin Crabb. I'm the worship chair at First Christian Church of Puyallup, and I welcome you. If you're watching right now, you have found our website and you know how to find our services and sermons. And we know that at this time, it's more important than probably ever before that we communicate well with you and you with us. We have an email that goes out every week that's called The Week Ahead. You may already be getting it. But if you're not and you'd like to know more about things that you can plug into in the church, even though we're not at the church building, then let us know and we will get you on the mailing list for that email. It's kind of a calendar of events, things that are coming up in the week ahead or maybe the next 2 weeks. And it also has Zoom links for those events that need the Zoom information. If you haven't used Zoom yet, it's really easy and it's so great. It's really great to see everybody's faces. We have evening prayers, we have meetings, we have Sunday study that meets by Zoom, and everyone is just so happy to see each other these days. We'd love to see your face too. And we also have a snail mailing that's going out, a paper hard copy newsletter that is being mailed to all the people that we have contact information for. Hopefully you're already getting that and reading through it and finding out new things about what's going on in the life of the church and how our ministry teams and ministry areas are meeting and working really hard to make the best decisions for this little church during this crazy time. If you're not getting that newsletter, but you'd like to, again, you can call the church office, you can call me, and we will get you on that mailing list to make sure that you're getting all the communications that you'd like to. We know it's important. We want you to know what's going on and be in the loop. Our guest preacher this morning is Carrie Kesey. Carrie is the pastor at Inglewood Christian Church in Yakima, Washington. She has served churches around the United States. She's served in Washington as well as Kansas and Hawaii before she settled in at Inglewood, where she has been the pastor for 5 years. Carrie got her MDiv degree from Lexington Theological Seminary, and she also has 2 grown children. She has an 8-year-old granddaughter who she says is a delight in every way, and I believe her. Thank you so much, Carrie. We appreciate you bringing the sermon to us from Yakima. We look forward to hearing it, and I am very grateful to you for accepting my invitation. And with that, my friends, let us worship.
"20 weeks now worshiping from home, and we're slowly adjusting and learning this new routine. As that sudden startling interruption to our Sunday worship becomes more natural, we're able to return our focus to welcoming the presence of our God.
While we can't see the future and our familiar center is shifted, here we can breathe, regain our bearings, and get back to kilter. Here we find a constant, a presence, a helping hand that never fails.
In the middle of disruption and change, in storms and rough waters, we trust that we are never alone. And just like we always have, we light a candle to mark this time and this place as holy.
O gentle Spirit, as we light this flame and move among us, center our hearts, calm our minds. We seek the sacred in the ordinary, the holy in this in-between time. Your abiding presence with us, now and always. Amen.
Immediately he made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side, while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone, but by this time the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It's a ghost," and they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and beginning to sink. He cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You are of little faith, why do you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God."
I'm going to be sharing one of my favorite authors' stories with you. It's called Thunder Cake by Patricia Polacco, and I've made it into a PowerPoint. And I'm not going to read the whole story to you, but I'm going to do kind of an abridged retelling to make it shorter so that it fits into our time, okay? So this is, as I said, Thunder Cake by Patricia Polacco, and it's a story about her childhood when she went to her grandmother's farm in Michigan. On sultry summer days at my grandma's farm in Michigan, the air gets damp and heavy. Storm clouds glow for an instant with a sharp, crackling light, and then a roaring, low, tumbling sound of thunder makes the windows shudder in the panes. The sound of thunder scared me more than anything. Grandma looked at the horizon, drew a deep breath, and said, "This is thunder cake baking weather, all right." "I'll come out from under that bed. It's only thunder you're hearing," my grandma said. "Unless you let go of me, we won't be able to make a thunder cake today." "Thunder cake?" I stammered. Grandma explained how counting slowly to see lightning lets us know how far away this storm is, so we have time to make the cake, or it won't be real thunder cake. Grandma made a list of ingredients. "Let's gather all the things we'll need," she exclaimed. As they gathered the ingredients, a lightning flashed. We counted to 10 before the thunder roared. 10 miles, about an hour away, I'd say. "You'll have to hurry, child. Gather them eggs careful like," she said. Eggs from mean old Nellie Peck Hen? I was scared she'd try to peck me. Milk was next from old Kick Cow. As Grandma milked her, Kick Cow turned and looked mean right at me. I was scared. Lightning and thunder continued as we counted to 8. I was scared as we walked down the path through Tangleweed Woods to the dry shed for flour and sugar. Lightning and thunder continued brighter and louder as we counted to 7. As I crept into the dry shed, the lightning flashed and thunder bellowed as I counted to 6. It was dark and I was scared. "I'm here, child," Grandma said softly from the doorway. "Hurry now, we haven't got much time. We've got everything but the secret ingredients." 3 overripe tomatoes and some strawberries," Grandma whispered. I climbed up high on the trellis. I was scared. "I'm here, child," she said. Her voice was steady and soft. "You won't fall." Lightning again. I counted to 5 before the thunder growled. The trellis is that wooden thing that she's climbing. It's something that plants climb and grow up onto. We hurried into the warm kitchen. We measured, mixed, poured the batter into the cake pans, and put them into the oven. Lightning lit the kitchen. I only counted to 3 and the thunder rumbled and crashed. 3 miles away, Grandma said, and the cake is in the oven. We made it. We've made a real thunder cake. Grandma looked out the window and then at me. "Why, you aren't afraid of thunder. You're too brave, she said. I'm not brave, Grandma, I said. I was under the bed, remember? But you got out from under it, she answered. And you got eggs from mean old Nellie Peck Hen, and you got milk from old Kick Cow. You went through tangled woods to the dry shed. You climbed the trellis in the barnyard. From where I sit, only a very brave person could have done all them things. I thought and thought as the storm rumbled close. She was right. I was brave. Just then, the lightning flashed, and this time it lit the whole sky. Even before the last flash had faded, the thunder rolled, boomed, crashed, and boomed just above us. The storm was here. Perfect, Grandma cooed. Just perfect. Then the thunder roared above us so hard it shook the windows and rattled the dishes in the cupboards. We just smiled and ate our thunder cake. From that time on, I never feared the voice of thunder again. So that's our story. And the reason I told that story is it's kind of like our Bible story today. So let's do a little wondering about our Bible story. I wonder how Peter felt when he saw Jesus walking on the water. Lindsay, what do you think?
I think he might have felt a bit scared because no one's probably ever seen someone walking on water.
Michaela, what do you think?
Nervous and confused.
Those are good descriptive words. Any other ideas? Cooper, what do you think?
Scared and nervous.
Scared and nervous. Well, I wonder how Peter felt when he stepped out of the boat onto the water.
Proud.
Proud? Lindsay, what do you think?
I think he might have been a bit amazed that he was walking on water. I certainly would be.
I see Michaela nodding her head. I wonder how Peter felt when he started to sink into the water.
Terrified.
Yeah. Petrified. Oh. Yeah, because there might be sharks in there.
Never know. I wonder how Peter felt when Jesus helped him back into the boat.
He knew it. He probably knew it was the real Jesus.
Oh. So he didn't think it was a ghost anymore?
Nope.
I wonder when you have ever felt afraid. Can you remember a time?
When like there was lightning and thunder, and I was really scared.
Okay, so lightning and thunder are kind of scary to you too. Lindsay, what about you?
I felt pretty scared one time when I heard my dad snoring because he snores really loud. And I thought it was a ghost because it sounded like a ghost moan.
So it scared you because you didn't know what it was?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else think about a time when they've ever felt afraid?
When we went to the fair and on the big ride where you could see the whole fair, when they bumped into us, the riding thing.
So are they like bumper cars?
The gondola.
Oh, the gondola. Oh, okay. I wonder when you've ever tried to be brave when you were afraid.
I have a room that is like right by, it has a window that looks down onto the sidewalk. And when I was like younger, like 4 or 5, I used to think that a lion and tiger and bear and stuff were guarding the sidewalk when I was sleeping.
So that helped you be brave at night?
I tried to be brave about it, but I couldn't.
So that's something that helped you, and that's my next wonder. What helped you to feel brave when you were afraid? Lindsay, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
So, at night, when I was really little, I used to see shadows. Because at night my mind would mess with me, and I would see like dark figures or people in the hallway. And so what really comforted me was that my mom's room was literally just on the other side of the hallway, and our hallway is like, I can just spread my arms out like this, and
so she was really close.
Yes.
And that helps you be brave. How about you, Michaela?
Knowing that my parents' room was like guarding the front door.
Mm-hmm. So that helps you feel a little braver, having your parents close by?
Yeah.
Well, I think that Peter's kind of like you guys. When Jesus was close by, it helped him to feel brave. And it's nice to know that Jesus is always with us. We're never alone, are we? Well, thanks for sharing this story and this time with me. Would you pray with me? And I know you like to do a repeating prayer. Dear God,
Dear God,
thank you for being with us
thank you for being with us
every day.
every day.
Thank you for giving us Jesus
Thank you for giving us Jesus,
and knowing that he helps us be brave
and knowing that he helps us be brave
whenever we're afraid.
whenever we're afraid.
Thank you for your love.
Thank you for your love.
We love you too.
We love you too.
Amen.
Amen.
Will you join me in prayer? Loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, you, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, I love the water and I love the ocean, and some of you have probably seen some of my pictures on Facebook from my time down in Lincoln City, Oregon on the coast. And I love the Oregon coast. I love the sounds of the waves, and the Washington coast is the same. Beautiful miles and miles of shoreline to walk and to hunt for agates and shells. But I love any kind of water. I grew up in places where there always seemed to be creeks, and me and my brothers would go and hunt for crawdads and frogs and just splashing around. And my brothers turned into big fishermen. I didn't really catch that bug, but I still love the water. And I love lakes. I took my kayak out last weekend on the Yakima River, and it was full and flowing pretty quickly, but just enough for tiny little rapids where it's kind of like, wee, just enough. Much more, and I probably wouldn't have gotten in. But the water can be scary. The first time I was in a kayak, it was in the ocean, but it was in the Hawaiian Ocean, which is very different from the Northwest Ocean. The Hawaiian Ocean, you can have big waves, yes, in the wintertime, but a lot of times in the summer, the water is very still. The waves are very calm. They barely lap the shore. There's not a lot of sound and the crashing waves most of the year that you get. So I had decided this would be a good, fun thing to take a guided kayak trip out in a bay near where I lived and try my hand at kayaking in the ocean. And thankfully, it turned out to be kind of a gray day. It was a little bit rainy. And so I ended up being the only person who signed up to go on this guided kayak trip. So myself and the guide started out, And the morning was fine. It was, like I said, a little overcast, but there wasn't any rain, and it was a little bit cool, which was nice. And this was meant to be about a 2.5-hour guided kayak trip. And so we rowed out to this little island where you could get out and walk around a little bit, and we ate our lunch. Well, then, about that time, the wind started picking up. And then the waves started picking up. And so the guide said, well, we'd better make our way back. So we put our kayaks in the water. We started on our way back. And about halfway back, the waves really picked up. And he had told me, just make sure you head straight into the wave. Don't get turned sideways. And so I was paddling as hard as I could to try and stay straight. But the wind and the rain now had started too. So it was, pelting in my eyes, and the salt water was splashing in my eyes. And then the waves got to be probably, I think, you can't verify this, but I'm sure they were 5 or 6 foot waves. So finally the guide said, you know what, I have a rope and a hook, and I'm gonna hook my rope to your kayak. So we're hooked together, don't worry. I had my life jacket on. I know the water's warm, but I still didn't want to be out in the middle of the ocean, bobbing around in a life jacket. So he hooked his kayak to mine, and we started to paddle back, and he said, paddle as hard as you can, lady. And so I was back there just paddling as hard as I could, and we finally made it back to shore. But it took twice as long, so it ended up being about a 5-hour kayak day. But I figured once I got through that, most other kayak trips or outrigger canoe trips were great. But there's a feeling that you get when you're out on a lake or even in the river in a boat with no motor. There's a feeling of vulnerability, of smallness. Even on the Yakima River, just a couple times the current was moving faster than I thought, and it would try to push me sideways and push me over into the bushes. And there's a feeling of, am I strong enough to keep, to row hard enough? Can I get this turned back and going the right direction? I imagine the disciples had that feeling multiplied as they were out in this boat in the middle of what's called the Sea of Galilee, or the Lake of Gennesaret, which is a big freshwater lake, big enough to get big storms and big waves, but it's not the ocean. So Jesus had, just prior to this in chapter 14, he has just learned that John the Baptist has been beheaded. His disciples have buried John, taken his body and buried him. And then they go from that. Jesus tries to retreat to the mountains, Matthew tells us, to pray, as Jesus often did. He would withdraw to take time to pray. But the crowd follows him, and it's a big crowd. We know this because it's this crowd that follows Jesus, of some 5,000, not counting women and children, Matthew says. So well over 5,000 who follow him, and Jesus has compassion on them, and the disciples say, send the people away. I love the King James says, to get victuals. Send them away to get victuals. And Jesus says, no, you feed them. And the disciples say, but we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. But Jesus takes it and blesses it and breaks it, and there's enough for everyone, with 12 baskets left over, symbolic maybe of the disciples. So following this, finally Jesus says, that's it, I'm done. I'm going up to that mountaintop to pray by myself. You disciples, you go in the boat, go to the other side. In Matthew, they're leaving Galilee, where Herod is, to get away from Herod, who has just beheaded John the Baptist. And it reminds us that even Jesus was cautious at times. Jesus didn't needlessly put himself or his disciples in harm's way or at risk. So the disciples are rowing and working hard through the night, trying to cross to the other side. And Matthew tells us the wind is against them. They haven't been able to get across. And then again, the King James, with its lovely poetic language, tells us that in the fourth watches of the night, the last part of the night, those hours between 3 and 6 a.m., and if you ever have trouble sleeping, you know those are also the times when you wake up and maybe your mind is filled with all of the dire things that can happen. But it's the darkest hour before dawn. It's the last part of the night. And so in King James, we hear that Jesus comes walking to them in the fourth watches of the night. I imagine by this time the disciples are exhausted physically. They're frightened. The storm has been raging all night. They're wondering, I imagine, why Jesus sent them and left them and didn't come with them. And we know in Matthew, Jesus has already calmed a storm once. So I imagine they may be thinking, if Jesus was here, we could have gotten across to the other side in plenty of time and everything would have been fine. But through that pre-dawn light, barely light, with the wind and the spray of the water probably creating a mist, they see a figure. Matthew tells us they're terrified. So terrified, they scream. They are sure they're seeing a ghost. And why wouldn't they think that? It's not as if they know this story. They see a figure on the water. What else would it be besides a ghost? Who wouldn't be terrified seeing a figure coming across a raging lake on top of the water? Our assumption would be that it was a ghost. Would we recognize Jesus in the midst of that storm? Do we recognize Jesus in the midst of our own storms? Jesus tells them, take heart, have courage. That word courage, kur, meaning heart. Take heart, do not be afraid, it is I. As I said, Jesus has already calmed the sea once, so imagine their relief when they hear this voice, and they put this voice with this figure coming toward them, their amazement, their joy, their reassurance that everything will be okay. Hearing Jesus say these words, it is I, do not be afraid. And then our wonderful friend Peter, ever the model of all of humanity, of all of us really, challenges this figure. Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you. So Jesus says, all right, come. So Peter steps out of the boat. Now remember that there has been no calming of the waves, no stilling of the wind. That is still going on as Peter steps out of the boat. Jesus sends the disciples across to the other side. Jesus calls Peter out of the boat. It's no guarantee of smooth sailing. Jesus doesn't say, okay, I'm going to calm the waves here now and get ready, put on your life jacket, Peter, and take a few steps out toward me. No, everything is still going on. And Jesus says, come on, Peter. And Peter steps out of the boat. No matter what some peddlers of health and wealth gospel want to tell people, following Jesus is no guarantee of smooth sailing. As the waves come around him and lap his legs and probably splash his face, Peter begins to sink. And he cries out, Lord, save me. And then again, Matthew says, immediately, Jesus reaches out and catches Peter. I have, for some reason, one arm, but I imagine Peter probably needed both arms of Jesus to catch him and lift him up out of the water. And Jesus says to Peter, you of little faith. Or another way to translate that is, why did your faith get scant? Why did your faith lessen? But they get into the boat, and the wind then ceases. And then all of the disciples, Matthew tells us, worship and say to Jesus, truly, you are the Son of God. Peter is the only one who has the faith to step out of the boat. Peter is the only one that Jesus reaches out and grabs and saves from the water. But Peter's action and Jesus' rescue bring faith to all the other disciples in the boat. Most of my life, I have heard this story, preached this story with the focus on Peter. If only Peter had kept his eyes on Jesus, he wouldn't have sunk, is what we often hear, how we often think of this story. Poor, dumb, faithless Peter. Yeah, he gets out of the boat, but then he looks away from Jesus and he gets scared and he sinks. And I think there's something that we're saying that if we had enough faith, like if Peter had enough faith, he could also walk on water. If we had enough faith, we could also walk on water. We won't sink if we keep our eyes on Jesus. And that's a beautiful message. But how many of us, in Peter's situation, in our own situation, find it possible to keep our faith so focused that we don't allow the winds and the storms and the turbulence around us at times to overwhelm us, to fill us with fear, to fill us with doubt? Jesus doesn't admonish Peter when he rescues him. He doesn't say, okay, Peter, well, before I rescue you, I need to know that your faith is strong. No, Jesus immediately rescues Peter when Peter cries out. Peter has enough faith to dare Jesus. Peter has enough faith to step out of that boat and walk toward Jesus, that he's maybe not 100% sure is Jesus. But the heart of the story isn't about Peter. The heart of this story, and I think our story, isn't the question of do we have enough faith to keep our eyes on Jesus and walk on water, or to keep our eyes on Jesus and the storms won't rise. Even walking toward Jesus, the wind and the waves are still rising and crashing. Even following Jesus, we still need saving. We still need rescuing. And our rescue, our saving, it isn't dependent on our faith. It isn't dependent on ourselves, our strength, our ability to row or swim. No, it isn't our strength of will or faith in the midst of storms that keeps us afloat. The point is, Jesus is there. Jesus is there in the wind and the waves with Peter. And when Peter calls for help, Jesus immediately stretches out his hands to catch him. Even when we don't recognize him, Jesus is there. Even when we take that chance and step out of the boat and in a moment regret it, Jesus is there. When the waves threaten to sink us, when circumstances threaten to overwhelm us, when we feel like surely we're going to sink, we're going under, Jesus is there. He hears our cry. Jesus isn't safely in the boat or on the shore, calling out, keep on going, you're doing a good job. Row as best as you can. Come on, lady. This is about Jesus, who's there all along. When we step out of the boat, sometimes we step out of the boat and we walk buoyantly and we're filled with faith and we can count all of the blessings and we're confident and we're almost walking across the waves. But life happens and we get frightened and we cry out, Lord, save me. Walter Brueggemann says this isn't the story of the skeptic who habitually doubts, but of the faithful follower who becomes overwhelmed by the circumstances surrounding him, who begins to lose his nerve when he discovers the odds stacked against him, but who from Jesus finds a steadying, delivering hand. When our faith seems to unravel, or our certainties seem to unravel, when it seems like right now the world is unraveling, when we feel we are sinking in the wind and the waves, we don't need to hear, "Have more faith." That's not the message of the gospel. We need to hear, Jesus is with us in the wind and the waves, reaching out, ready to rescue us before we sink, hearing us cry out, "Jesus, save me," holding out his hands to hold us up. Jan Richardson has a beautiful poem called "Blessing on the Waves" that I'd like to share with this morning. I cannot promise that this blessing will keep you afloat, as if by lashing these words to your arms and ankles, you could stop yourself from going under. The most this blessing can do, perhaps, is to stand beside you in the boat, place its hand in the small of your back and push. Be assured that though this blessing is eager to set you in motion, it will not leave you forsaken, will not compel you to leap where it has not already stepped out. These words will go with you across the waves. These words will accompany you across the waters. And if you find yourself flailing, this blessing will breathe itself into you, will breathe itself through you until you are borne up by the hands that reach toward you, the voice that calls your name. Amen.